Welcome to the Nerve Guys podcast, where we discuss movement, performance, and rehabilitation through the lens of the brain and nervous system. The Nerve Guys podcast is hosted by Gareth Kelly and James McCambridge. To find out more about the Nerve Guys or to book into our online or in-person training programs, please visit thenerveguys.co.uk. The Nerve Guys podcast is sponsored by Elite Vision Sticks. Every day, athletes of all levels are reaching their full performance potential with Elite Vision Sticks. Pick up yours today. Hello, everyone. Today, we have with us Clare Taylor from Kinekt Fit. This is a pretty exciting one for me because me and Clare actually used to work together a long time ago now at the National Gymnastics Centre in Belfast. So hello, Clare. Thanks for joining. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys. Good to be here.
Yeah. This is like I said. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about that kind of crossover between gymnastics and sport and the kind of fitness and rehab world and what the transitions and crossovers are. I feel like I could probably give you a bit of an introduction, but I don't think I'll do it justice because your gymnastics career was well before mine, and we haven't seen each other in a while either for all the stuff you've been doing with Kinekt. So would you be happy to run us through what got you to here? So what have you been doing in the world of gymnastics, and then what made you decide to swap to kind of the fitness world?
Okay, well, like you said, I have been involved in gymnastics all my life. I was picked up in the playground at 4 years of age because I could cartwheel both directions equally as well. And primary one teacher said, I know a man, Mr. Tony Byrne, you obviously know him well, who may be able to snap you up, and that's exactly what happened. And I progressed on to representing the country, being on the British national squad for a number of years, and then I went on to coach for 20 years of coaching, believe it or not, all different levels, but always within the artistic field, women's artistic. So as much as I love the sport, I think it's a fascinating sport that everybody should try and experiment with at some stage in their life because of the benefits that it brings. I felt that keeping the knowledge within the sport was selfish, because I felt that other sports, other people could benefit hugely from the benefits that gymnastics teaches you in terms of body awareness, spatial awareness, just being able to move and use your body, and even the thought processes of sort of elite performance. And I wanted to be able to experience working with other sports and bring what I know and what I've learned my entire life into down other directions and avenues. So I actually stepped away during the first lockdown, because knocking your pan in for 40-45 hours a week, you get on that hamster wheel, don't you? It's just, you get up, you do what you do, you go home, you sleep, you get up, you do what you do, and that vicious cycle. But when we were just all forced to stop, I asked myself some very deep questions. Claire, where are you going? Do you know what I mean? What are you doing? What do you really, really want to do? And so I came to a bit of realization that I wanted to spread my wings and I wanted to learn new things, and this is where I am today. So I went on and did the whole FRC side of things, functional ranging conditioning. So I work with a lot of people in terms of helping with mobility, and I have been working a lot with general public and I enjoy it, but I find my heart is very much still in the sports world.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask as well, because did your train of thought with gymnastics, did it change over time? So I know you were saying kind of that it's selfish to keep everything in the gymnastics world or anything. Imagine the answer might be yes, given you had 20 years of coaching, but you think about it, for me, when I was while I was in Salto gymnastics with you, I could very much argue that there was no sport better. It was like the only thing that was useful to the general public and stuff. And now I kind of, after experiencing circus and stuff, I go, oh, there's actually different ways to do things. And so that was interesting to me. But I wonder, how did it change? How did your thoughts on like gymnastics as a sport, and as well as how it could help other people, how did that change?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't know everything. Nobody does know everything. We're always students, everyday students, and we can always keep expanding and learning. But I felt I'd hit a level where it wasn't exciting me as much as what it used to excite me. You know, there's all these big skills and stuff, and I was finding myself seeing things and going, yeah, that's good. But, and you know, my attention was going in other directions. And my mind started to go in a way that what we do here, I could use to help other sports in terms of how we train and just being able, the way we use our bodies basically, and just creating forces and just tension in the body. And when I started to experience other sports and watching other sports train, I felt that a lot of sports were skipping those basic fundamentals, and they were trying to go from A to Z very quickly. And this is why people were starting to drop out and become injured, because they didn't have those basic fundamentals in place. And I just felt that, you know, I didn't really get a buzz out of teaching the really high level stuff anymore. I was getting more of a buzz out of the nitty gritty, detailed work of body alignment and movement and just dysfunctional movement and trying to correct things. And I just seen a bigger world out there that could benefit from what I'd learned. And I fell out of love with sport itself. As a coach in the sport, I just felt I needed more of a challenge and move in a different direction.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Like in terms of the intricacy of stuff, you can kind of go both directions there. There's like the super detail in the highest level of things, but then I think that's what we decided to start doing with the applied neuroscience stuff, was going like, how much detail can we get into the very basics? And I think in some aspects in like the sport world, I remember seeing, was it Andy Murray, maybe? He was the tennis player, and they showed him, he was doing like a gymnastics circuit where he's sort of going, oh, this is actually helpful for me. And you watch it, and obviously world-class tennis player, definitely not going to be a gymnast anytime soon, but he was raving about it, being like, yeah, this is actually really good for all of my body awareness, and like you said, the sort of fundamentals of things. Do you find that athletes and sort of sports people that you work with, or do they buy into it easily, or is there a lot of convincing that you have to do?
I've been very lucky because they've approached me when they've heard, you know, obviously we're all connected to certain other people, you know, we're only 2 people away from knowing another person, something like that. And they've contacted me purely because of my background in gymnastics and them knowing that I'd been involved for a long time. And I think it's I don't know whether it's the right word to use, but they're very much early adopters in terms of understanding the importance of those little intricacies within movement and how that affects performance later on down the line. And if we don't get those right and corrected in an early stage, I think there's an awful lot of heartache for skill coaches out there in trying to teach higher level stuff, no matter what sport you're in. If that athlete does not understand their body and understand how to make it work to the best possible advantage to them and their sport, you can run over old ground over and over and over again. But if we put it in place right at the very beginning, and I'm talking even youth sports, let's get it in there when they're young, because one, they know their body. When they start to mature and grow, it's not so much running around not understanding what's happening. They've got it. They can work through that process and that phase so much quicker. Plus as well, it protects them from the degeneration of dysfunction, you know, if that's put in place right from the very beginning.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about things anyway.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think what's the book? Range by David Epstein. I get it wrong every time. Stein. David Epstein. Range.
Yeah.
It's a whole book about, why variation is actually better, apart from maybe certain things like chess, where the rules never change, the environment never changes. Actually, the more diverse of a wealth of experience that you've got from as many different places as possible, that's always going to serve you well at the one thing that you do want to excel at, because every time you have to change or learn a new thing, you can just sort of go, oh yeah, I'll pick it up from here. I'll pick it up from here.
Well, that's the key, isn't it? If there's a variable at all in your sport, then variation is the key.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We used to describe it as like you build your skill up to the point where it's like a mountain, like you get this little peak on the top of the mountain, which is the skill, like your round off double back that's taken you ages to perfect. And then if you want to learn, let's say, a side somersault, well, actually you've kind of got to go all the way down the mountain to about here and then start building it. Whereas if you can be working on different types of rolling patterns, and if all of your fundamentals are raised up, like the whole bar is raised quite high to begin with, then it's just many little peaks that don't take so much traveling down and traveling up to get to it.
Absolutely. I even notice, and I'm sure you guys are the same, that, especially when I'm working with the younger generation in sport, straight away, they've done gymnastics, just because they seem to get it. They seem to be able to manage their bodies so much more naturally than what a child who maybe hasn't experienced it. And, I've always thought that gymnastics is the grassroots for all sports. I even remember working in Salto, and years ago, myself and Tony used to get up exceptionally early to go in, because we had the likes of Ulster hockey players coming in, we had athletes coming in, pole vaulters, who wanted to come in and use the facility, but also gain the knowledge and the experience of more spatial awareness, flexibility, mobility, strength training from a gymnastics perspective. And they find that extremely beneficial, this type of stuff that they learned, and then utilizing that in their own sports, So even back then, you could definitely see the benefits of having some knowledge or having some experience in the sport.
Yeah, I think gymnastics, from my point of view, this is coming from someone who's really always was circus more than anything else, but I've done some sort of adult-based gymnastics classes, and then I've taken tumbling classes, obviously, at circus school and all that kind of thing. Gymnastics is one of those sports that has a better foundation for better movement, if that makes sense, all around. Because obviously you're working on all of the sort of the neurally important skills. So vestibular, you're doing loads of different rolling patterns all the time as part of the sport. Proprioceptive feedback, your joints are working, your joints are working with the environment as well. And visually, obviously, your vision is working. Whereas other sports, you only really do rolling patterns when you mess up and trip, or your vision. Do you know what I mean? It's not trained.
Yeah, and I it's funny you say that, because without it sounding arrogant, because I certainly don't mean it in that way, but when you play football, you run and you kick a ball. When you play hockey, you run and you hit a ball. When you play tennis, you run and you move different directions. But gymnastics is such a complex sport that it's running, it's jumping, it's tumbling, it's somersaulting, it's upside down, it's standing up. It's there's so many different aspects, because it's such a technical sport that it just teaches everything, doesn't it? Yeah,
it's hard not to cover all the bases of how the brain should function. So it's hard not to kind of hit all those little bits. Obviously, coming from a brain point of view, body as well, it will teach obviously your joints to move quite well. There's always exceptions to everybody, but generally, it will teach you how to move your joints. It will teach you better at getting, certain skills and patterns and things. Whereas, the likes of, as you say, football, you're kind of run forwards and backwards. Thinking through the vestibular system. Whereas in gymnastics, it's all of them.
I think for me, it even as when I was a coach with gymnastics, you kind of did see that. Like I had obviously the boys that I was teaching quite often, especially in the younger groups, they would do gymnastics and we go, oh, this kid's going to be really, really good. But then every other sport also would clock on, like, just because they were getting good at gymnastics, like, actually, well, now the rugby guys want him, or now the swimmers want him. And so you get a lot of ones leaving because they were doing a lot of gymnastics training. But then because of that, they were doing a little bit of rugby, and straight away they were kind of outshining all the rugby players. And so actually as a developmental sport, especially, I guess, it's probably really useful. Yeah. Not so great for us wanting to keep the gymnasts, but...
No, exactly. And I remember back in the day, I know we can't do this now, but back in the day, especially when you started to get picked for representing country at that sort of level, you know, you were told no PE in school, you're not allowed to do athletics, you're not allowed to do any other sports, because obviously every other sport wanted you. When you're training 24 hours a week, you know what I mean, 26 hours a week, everybody's going to want you because you have that skill, you know, to take down any sport. But I know these days with kids doing so much, you can't really lay down the law as much as you used to be able to do back in the good old days, you know, so things have definitely changed.
I do think that it's a blessing and it's a curse. I think the fact that gymnastics does help things like, I would say, especially the vestibular system, sort of develop. And then whenever other sports starts noticing, you know, that, oh, actually, this child is a little bit further along than some of the other counterparts that don't, for example, do rolling patterns, and, you know, they never end up with their pelvis above their head intentionally.
Yeah.
You know, actually go, oh, we can take this one.
Yeah, and when they fall, they go down like a ton weight. But when a gymnast falls, they tend to do 2 or 3 tumbles, and away they go again. You know.
Yeah. So I have a question actually that I don't know if there'll be like a proper answer, but it's just because it's something that's been going on in my head for quite a while, and I think it's just because we brought up Andy Murray and watching him sort of struggle through that basic gymnastics circuit. I was wondering what your thoughts are in terms of like using gymnastics as a tool to help people experience something different versus taking gymnastics and then kind of injecting it into a new sport. So like, what do I mean by this? So the example with Andy Murray, he said, gymnastics is going to be really useful for me for my tennis. And then he did something that looked like very traditional gymnastics, and I can see where there's probably a lot of advantage in that, where you take someone and you tell them, hey, I'm going to give you a bunch of rules that you're really not used to, and now you have to start adapting to these, and that's probably really useful. I also got to work a little bit with the Chelsea Football Club Youth Academy, and they kind of had an approach where they were like, nah, we're gonna take gymnastics, we'll have like a gymnastics football session, or, you know, you come teach us gymnastics, or actually circus acrobatics, and we'll figure out how to put all of our football drills into the same thing. So we had, you know, a trampette or a springboard, and there'd be, you know, you're going to run up and you're going to do your dive roll. But a lot of the time in football, it's all about deceleration and things like that. So then they'd call out, you know, Mark or Luke, and whoever's name gets called out is the one that gets to jump, and the other one has to realize, you know, they have to run around. Or, you know, so it was like this intertwining of acrobatics with football, and then the other one was like, forget what you already know. Do you have any thoughts on, like, do you do it a certain way? Do you think there's value in both, one better than the other?
Okay, I think there's probably value in both, because I've worked with the IFA a number of times, and they brought me in specifically to do gymnastics, but when I was planning my sessions, I sort of thought, okay, so let's think, what does a footballer do? And you talked about the deceleration, change of direction, and so I started to integrate. Well, let's introduce a tumble, because they're going to fall over. They need to get up quickly. They need to change direction, find out where they are. So I was planning my sessions all around the foundations, I suppose, of football, and injecting the gymnastics into it. But for a footballer maybe to then come into a gymnastics environment, I think I've picked you up right, to do specifically gymnastics. Well, obviously the environment, being in a gymnastics environment, is going to be a lot more beneficial and safer for them. But I think a one-off or once or twice wouldn't be enough for them to fully benefit from the constant movement and the type of movements that are performed in gymnastics. I think it would have to be almost like an integrated part, and they do that as well as their football over a period of time before it would start to show within their football play. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's benefits to both. I do know that working with the IFA, the certain age group that I was working with, and it was female footballers actually, the feedback that I got from the strength and conditioning coaches was that the kids that were receiving the gymnastics tuition were so much more tuned in and clued in when it came into the weights room, because they had those fundamentals. They knew how to produce force throughout the body, create tension in the body, as where they were bringing younger footballers into the weights room for the very first time who hadn't done gymnastics, and they were having to teach all those basics, and it was taking a much longer process. So they found it fantastic that these kids were walking in that spent a number of months doing gymnastics a couple of times a week, and boom, they were ready to go. They were ready to squat, they were ready to lift, they were ready to do whatever it was the strength and conditioning coaches were doing with them. So
yeah, so I would err on, it depends on the age group you are working with, as you were saying. So like the younger kids, a basis in gymnastics and then going into the sport or the weight room or anything is great for the older generation, for the older age group, because I'm working with a goalkeeper at the minute for an Irish League side, and the best thing for them is integrating it in with their sport. So I tell them the best thing to do is make as an efficient movement pattern as possible out of an inefficient event. So if he's fallen or if he's stumbled or if he has to jump over somebody to get to the ball, how do you give him the options to make that as efficient as possible while still doing sport? Does that make sense?
And efficient and safe, I suppose, you know, so they know how to fall, and absolutely. So yeah, completely true. The age group is a big factor, isn't it? You know, and what it is that you teach as well. So
yeah, that's really cool as well. That I always thought of the crossover going the other way, like, you know, oh, well, you teach them gymnastics and then surely their football is going to improve. But actually, I never thought about the strength and conditioning coach then also getting that benefit, and then because of that, probably you're going to double down on the improvements in the football side of things. Like, you know, if they can already correlate improvements in strength and conditioning with improvements in football, then gymnastics to strength and conditioning, then actually, just this huge spike.
Well, yeah, my sort of theory would be, you know, well, let's teach it all at the young level, and then it's a much more fluid transition through the performance ladder, which is fundamentals are there, the basics, the understanding is there. Move to the next stage, they don't have to recover that ground again because it's in there. It just happens automatically. And then when they come to skills, they know their body. They don't need to get to know their body because they naturally just do it anyway. And I think the process of working up the ranks would be a lot quicker, a lot less frustrating for all the other coaches involved down the line.
Yeah, I think a lot of sports, especially I would probably, because I've dealt with it most, the likes of football and rugby are very quick to get their athletes, whether it's younger kids or slightly older teenagers and stuff that are going into academies, straight into the weight room.
Yeah.
And a lot of them can't even body weight squat properly.
Nope.
So I would, if I was writing out, I'd say a youth training plan, it would be a season or a block of gymnastics first, moving it through into the strength and conditioning, and then skills when they have the ability to perform the skills already laid down. I think a lot of places actually miss that kind of thing. They're just like weights.
And I think as well, from my experience and what I've experienced recently is completely 100% agree with what you're saying, Gareth. Coaches get so excited when they see a kid, oh, they're a great player. Let's push them on. And it's like, well, yeah, I get that they're a great player, but let's look at how they move, because if they don't move well, they may finish their career in sport in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Because they haven't been able to move well and they don't understand their body. So let's really focus on ensuring that they stay within the sport by trying to minimize injury as much as possible by fixing all these and giving them the right skills and the right tools to move and utilize. But it's getting under other coaches who maybe don't, well, I don't want to sound this rude, but who maybe don't understand that, and they're just so excited and they just want to push them on because they're going to be great players. Does that make sense to you?
We kind of find that a lot with the neuroscience stuff. So when we bring it in and go, oh, this eye exercise has reduced the threat your brain's experiencing. So actually you're now a little bit stronger or a little bit more flexible. So then you can go and do a little bit of the work in there, and hopefully then that range becomes normal. Some coaches are like, what?
Yeah. It's really hard to get someone excited about telling, we're going to make you way better at turning your head to the right. It's like, well, I'm not going to put that on Instagram.
Why? I know, exactly.
That doesn't win me any medals. And I think the useful analogy, the one that, because I also struggled with that, I was kind of, I think my introduction into neuroscience was through psychology, and there's a huge thing in psychology now. The movement is, I don't know if it's a movement, but positive psychology, and the idea is they sort of figured for people with like depressive symptoms or just, any of the negative aspects of mental health, they used to try to treat those symptoms and get everybody to neutral, and they found it wasn't working. And what then they said was, well, actually, what if we just try and make people just have a really good time, like just, play to your strengths, that sort of thing, always do what you enjoy. And then they found that actually brought people not only away from the negative, but into the positive. And so I struggled with that a little bit, because I said, oh, well, surely that's the same in the sport. Why shouldn't I I'm really good at backflips. Why shouldn't I just do thousands of backflips?
Yeah.
That's all I enjoy. It's all I like. And probably to an extent, that's true. I could push myself more and more and more. But then once I got into the neuroscience, they started talking about myelin, which is like this fat that wraps around your neurons. And if you don't spend any time on the basic skills, they don't get this fat wrapped around them, which means your brain has to think twice as hard before it does anything. And apparently that is the reason why so many people, when they get pushed, they get injured, is because their brain panics, and then it just says, hey, how about you just have a load of pain here or here or here? And that kind of helps. I had a question that was going to come out of that, and then I just talked for far too long. What was I going to say?
I don't know. But I like the idea. It's kind of like your car blowing a gasket if you push the car too hard, too quickly. Whereas if it's miling, really, really nicely miling, and it's like a little supercharged highway, so it's like a bumpy brick road.
Yeah.
It's like people, wanting to do stuff, in their minds they can see it, but their bodies haven't been trained or manipulated in a certain way to deal with that movement, you know what I mean? So they're pushing themselves beyond their capacity, only because it looks great and it looks exciting, and I know I can do that. But like you say, you come to a point and you go, boom, the body just goes, hold on.
Yeah.
This is not happening here. This is not happening. So here's a broken bone. Here's a torn ligament. Here's a snapped tendon, whatever it may be. And then people get that psychological sort of downturn that I've been injured doing this, and then it creates that whole fear factor, doesn't it? It can create that whole fear factor.
You find it with concussion.
With what, sorry?
With concussions. Any footballers or anything like that we've had with concussions, they'll feel like they've went away and they've rested it, and then they're coming back to play, and all of a sudden their vision goes blurry, or it goes like time lapse, black, on, off, and they start freaking out, and it's because they felt like they could go back to where they are, but they still have a traumatic brain injury that they haven't effectively recovered, so the body just goes, and brings on symptoms.
Yeah. And I guess one of the other interesting things with putting gymnastics into this sort of stuff, actually, it's probably a way you could get more excited about the fundamentals of things. Like if you're just going to have your standard strength and conditioning training, I can see how, just thinking for myself, I'd get excited if I could lift something a bit heavier, or, you know, and as long as I can show somebody, look at this number, it's bigger. But then for the rest of the stuff, it's like, well, what else am I going to do? Is like, well, you're going to do a bunch of lunges. Okay, they're not that cool. You're going to do some press-ups, right? Fine. But if you could then go, well, you could either do the lunges and press-ups, or we could add some rolling patterns, and we could add some like different directions and spinning and jumping and things like that. I think that's probably a good way to get people a bit more excited about, like, being able to keep it on that basic level, but still teaching them something that feels like a skill at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried stuff like that with people, some clients who've been coming to me for a while now, who are not sports people, and I try to introduce a lot of coordinated style, strength, and movement. And I'm very much a demonstrator. I'm very much a doer. You know, I find it's okay. Well, let me just show you. I'll talk you through it, and then you can try it yourself. And I found some people, because they don't have that sort of very basic understanding of how their body's operating, they find it all very confusing, you know, in terms of, that's a lot of stuff to take on there, you know, as where I might not feel it's a lot of stuff, but then I have to say, hold on, Claire, these are normal everyday people who haven't been through the process of training for many, many, many years. And I know that sometimes I have to say, Claire, come on, wise up. Let's break it down and make this much more simple, you know. But it's trying to remove the boredom of just lifting weights and just squatting and just lunging, in order to keep it interesting for people, you know, and give them variety.
Yeah, I think the layman lifting weights, sort of when they're in the gym, they lift the weights the way they've seen, like, the health magazines or 80s action films. Again, 80s action films. I blame 80s action films for a lot.
Okay.
Like, no pain, no gain. Like,
yeah,
lifting a log, going you know, and that massively muscular build and all that kind of thing. That's what they think they should. Where actually, to take it a look back further, so you can look at gymnastics, the way people move there. You can still get extremely muscular if you want it, doing really, you know, functional movements and that involve, you know, controlling your own body. Or you go further even back, if you want to lift weights, old school strongman things.
Yeah.
Well, the bench press was there. It was the bent press that you would, you would lie on the floor and you would back bridge it up and then press it up.
Yeah.
But then one guy was really good at it, so that everybody else could compete. They took his skill out of it and put a bench in. And you know, all these movements, like the squat, the bench press and all, they all used to be harder than they are now.
Yeah.
A little bit of it, the fun is the skill of learning the hard skill. So it's the skill.
Absolutely. It's the cognitive challenge. Yeah, the cognitive challenge, isn't it? You know, and the opening up those new neural pathways from learning all these new movement patterns.
Exactly. And if you go into a gym these days, you'll find that 90% of the people in the gym are bored.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because the movements have been watered down to the very, very, very basic version of the movements. So when they get something like gymnastics or something like that, they're like, this is great. I have fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. And they can really let themselves go. They can really just let loose and especially if you're in that gymnastics environment where you've got the safety and you've got the pits and everything like that, then it does create that little bit more of a courage inside. Well, hold on, I could chuck this in here and I'm going to be all right. We all know, James, that is not necessarily the case sometimes. Landing in the pit can cause major injuries.
Oh yeah, I've hurt myself too.
Yeah, I mean, we've got huge debates as well over that, like, how much is too much. And so when I started, when we both started on our circus careers, I think I arrived into places now we just have solid floor. And I go, oh, this is really dangerous. And their argument was, well, when are you ever going to perform on a stage that has, you know, a sprung floor? That's never going to happen. So why would you train on a sprung floor? And then as soon as you bring it out onto the stage, then you've got a whole nother adaptation to go through. And so that was a big learning curve for me. And then I thought on the other side is, how sometimes in gymnastics, can we make it seem like it's too safe, where, you know, you see those a lot of the times with the teenagers, especially, like the renegade, just I can do whatever I want, and that is
and you're going, oh no, don't do it. And I sort of had the best of both worlds too. You know, I'm 40 plus, I won't tell you how many pluses, but I would have been back in the day tumbling and competing on hard surfaces, on beams that has those sharp wooden edges, you know what I mean? You split that beam and oh my God, it was not nice. So I've been through that phase of the very basic equipment and then moved through my gymnastics career when the equipment started to become a lot more advanced. And then when you look at gymnastics today and you see the skill that's being performed, you know, the level of difficulty, but it's also because the equipment has become so advanced. You've got fiberglass bars now that you can bounce a mile into the air if you jump off them, and the coils and the floors so much more sprung and so much more reactive. So of course that's going to help you perform and give you more airspace and time to do more difficult and complex movements and skills, you know.
Yeah, I wonder, is that, I'm going slightly off topic, but I wonder, is that even also necessary a bit, where people go, I don't, like you said, you were coaching for 20 years and you kind of like, well, it changes, but it's not changing. Yeah. So it gets a bit boring after a while. And so maybe, like, aren't they doing it in running now with the spikes in the shoes and everyone's saying, oh, this is not fair to Usain Bolt. But then it's like, well, then all we're going to do is just watch nobody beat that record for years.
Yeah.
Maybe people don't want to see that. Even in speed cubing, when I do Rubik's Cubes, like the whole big thing over the last 10 years was how good they could make the equipment. Like it wasn't really faster people, it was better equipment. And now that's starting to taper off. So it's becoming much more interesting to see, like, oh, how are we gonna break records now, because we don't think the equipment that we're using can get any faster, which is quite I was going to ask, so we got a little bit of time left. I thought it might be nice to flip this conversation on its head and actually talk about things going. So we sort of talked like how gymnastics can be really great for other things. I'm wondering now as well that since you've been getting into like the FRC stuff and you've got to work with a load of different sports and kind of see how either different athletes train or how different athletes respond to things, and especially the fact that you've had to, I guess, deconstruct things, like you were saying, rather than look at the intricacy of the high level movement, you've had to deconstruct a little bit further down. I wonder, do you have any thoughts on, is there anything that you've learned, say, in FRC that you're like, if I had known this during my time coaching gymnastics, I could have made a bigger difference? I think, well, like one for me would be, I think there's a lot of people that kind of fall through the cracks. Like we do tests for the kids, and, at 4 years old, we kind of go, yeah, you're probably going to be a gymnast. You're probably not. But a lot of that is just, you're going to respond best to this kind of training. But maybe if we had more knowledge about that basic training, maybe more people might be available. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that yourself?
FRC definitely has expanded my thinking and expanded my brain, and just how detailed it is. And obviously, the first real thing that really was highlighted for me was I was looking at how gymnasts and sports warmed up, and the majority of them warm up with the use of obviously momentum, swinging, lots of fast movements, things like that, get the body moving. Obviously you need to raise the heart rate, but the fact that with the FRC model everything's really slowed down, controlled, that I started to ditch my sort of gymnastic style warm-up and focused more on the FRC style warm-up, which is obviously very deep joint orientated work. I actually find that I'm probably stronger, more mobile, and have more control than I've ever had, even as a gymnast, because I just feel it's a lot more focused. And I find that if gymnasts were to utilize this and integrate this into their own training, they would probably injure an awful lot less as well, because it's a very sort of nitty gritty, let's break it down and let's have you feeling a lot more control within the body rather than those quicker movements. So I think, yes, if this had been around 20 years ago, I probably would maybe have not injured as much. But I definitely don't feel like I have a body like a 40-plus-year-old. I feel that my body's probably not weight-wise, but strength-wise and movement-wise in the best condition that it's ever been. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's I think I would agree on that with the warm-ups. I get the feeling in a lot of gymnastics warm-ups, the warm-up is just the thing that you learn, and then that's just going to be what you do. You don't ever need to know why, and that's fine if it works, and it probably does certain things. And like moving quickly, I can see for floor and for vault where you're going to suddenly be really, really springy right after. That's probably a good idea. But if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, it's probably not making that connection with your brain. And with slow movements, you kind of have to pay attention, right?
You have to pay attention, and it's also then you sort of then start to think why you're doing it. What's the purpose of doing it? What's the reason for doing this? And obviously with the FRC, there's obviously the intent of why do you need to increase your shoulder external rotation or internal rotation, whatever it may be. So I think if it had been there 20 years ago, when you're really analysing complex movements and what needs to move in what direction in gymnastics, having that FRC model would have been fantastic. And I know before I stepped away from gymnastics, I would have done some work with some of the more senior boys. And more and more people would have come up to me and said, Clare, I've got a wee twinge here. And obviously I'm not a therapist, never claimed to be a therapist, but your mind, since learning FRC, my mind would have went, okay, let's try this, and go away and try it for a couple of weeks. And they would have been coming back and saying, flip me, my shoulder feels great. It's like, well, yeah, it's not all about these really fast, difficult moves. Sometimes it's about simplicity. Let's keep it simple and let's tune in and really feel what's happening here. And when you understand the little gnarly pieces, when you're moving through a certain movement, say a shoulder controlled articular rotation, and there's a little gnarly area, well, let's bring it back and let's fix it around that gnarly area, and then do the full movement again. So it's nice to know that this is now around, and a lot of people are using it a lot more. It's great to see. Kinstretch as well, done the Kinstretch, and I think it's an amazing tool for developing the body and just building strength and resilience and control within the body.
Yeah, because we would use that kind of thing quite a bit in the way we work. Now we would probably go for sensory stuff first and then into the motor stuff, but we would use that kind of FRC, as in move the joint through the full range of motion under control. If you find proprioceptively, that's a great way to learn about your body and to just get your brain sort of switched on and it knows where your body is.
It comes largely to just if you want to find the big problem, like why can't I do the complicated thing? You probably don't need to be looking at the complicated things. Just find what's the most basic thing you're not able to do, and if you can sort that, if you can sort out just one little thing, actually you're less stressed out when you're trying to put all those things together. You don't have to take that one extra little bit of stress that's throwing you off.
It's people building a better relationship with their body. It's like that mind-body connection, and you do have to. I used to be the person going into the gym when I was training, when I was going through a CrossFit phase, and the music's blasting and you're pumping away, and it's the harder you go, the better you get. And now when I go to train, everything's off. I like silence because I like to tune in. I like to tune in to what's going on in my body. What am I feeling here? Why am I feeling this? And I find working with general public, that's a big learning curve for people. You're probably the same, guys. It's teaching people how to feel. Let's tune in and let's feel. What are you feeling? Explain to me what you're feeling. And you're asking people that sort of work certain muscles, and it's like, I can't even move that. I don't even know how to move that. So it's a lot of tactile touching, and okay, let's get this working. You feel it now. Oh yeah, okay, I can feel it now. I find that really, really fascinating. In watching people going from not having a clue about what's moving, what's not moving, to now I get it, and I find that really rewarding.
Have you ever got with somebody and you're training them for the first time, say you do it with no music or anything, on how much they hate the sound of their own breath?
Yes.
That's the thing it almost freaks them out. They're like, I can't, this is making me more tired.
I know, and you see when you're teaching breath work, and rib expansion and things like that, and you're like, no, I want to hear you. Come on, let's breathe that out. And they're going, I'm like, no, breathe it out, get it out there, and they're almost embarrassed and they feel awkward because I've never done this before. And it's like, no, exhale, fully exhale. I want to hear you do it. Blow those million candles a mile up in the air out. Yeah. And it's getting them over that wee awkward phase, isn't it? Yeah. But once you get them over that, then it's amazing the results you can achieve. Yeah.
Yeah. I especially think learning a new skill yourself later on in life is always really good, because especially if you've become an expert in movement, like, you were a gymnast, I had the circus stuff, you had lifting and circus. And if you try something, like, you sort of have that of like, just do this. It's like, I can't do that. I've never not been able to do that before. I have no idea what you mean. And then when you start learning something that's alien to you, you sort of get this idea of like, actually I'm starting to feel stuff, and it just gives you that reminder that you maybe weren't paying attention to when you were like a kid.
It's like you reach a whole new different level of awareness, don't you? When you tune in, it's like, okay, well, now you're here. Well, now my level of awareness is up here, and when it is raised, then you can teach so much more, and the understanding is so much clearer.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at the time, and I think we're gonna have to start wrapping things up. But before I go, I wanted to find out, so in terms of the sort of coaching that you do and things like that, what is it that you said you're currently working with sort of general public as well as sports? Do you do that online? Do you do it in person? Do you have a space?
Okay, I work with different sports. So at the moment I'm football and swimming, but I do go into clubs and I offer team training, just small group athlete training, stuff like that. But I also work with general public. I have my own studio here at home, very small studio, but it's perfect for me. And I do some one-to-one stuff and some sort of small group, sort of 3 to 4 people at once, in terms of mobility and some strength and conditioning. So yeah, I'm sort of bouncing between a few different things, but love the variety. I like the variety rather than just being stuck to one thing all the time. And it's a combination of strength and conditioning, mobility, body awareness, all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Nice. And what's the best? I know I definitely recommend to people your Kinekt Fit Instagram. What's the best to kind of find where you are if people are interested in kind of learning more or anything like that? Do it.
Yeah, well, Instagram, Facebook, obviously just through Google. I'm registered with Google as well. So yeah, contact me that way, and all my other sort of email and telephone number is on all my sort of social media channels, so you can get hold of me there.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, I guess we're going to have to leave it there. Claire, thank you very much for coming to chat to us. That was really fun. It's also been really good to see you again after a long time. And hopefully we'll get chatting again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for your time, guys. You're doing a great job. I just want to say that too. Keep it going.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.